Okay, so in this tutorial we're going to create the base of the NES controller, and we're going to do it as a high poly first, but we're going to leave the modifiers ready for us to be able to convert it back down to a low poly so that we can bake the high onto the low. So we're going to start with just the standard cube. So if you open Blender, this is the first thing that you're going to see. So we're going to bring in, so Shift A to bring in a image, and we're going to bring in a reference image. And then here I'm going to need to go and just grab my NES controller. Oh, okay, so here's one thing that you need to do. So I'm just going to delete or undo what I just did there. You need to make sure that you're looking at it from a top-down view. So 7 on the keyboard means you were looking straight down. Then we can go Shift A, down to Image, into Reference, and then NES Open. Okay, so you'll find this image on Google. I'll put a link to it on the classroom and on the YouTube page as well. So the image should be set to scale, so we don't need to change it, we don't need to move it or anything like that, so that can just stay as it is. And then over here we can see we've got our first collection, which has got a camera, a cube, and empty, which is the actual reference. So I'm just going to put ref in there, and our light. First thing I want to do is I want to move my cube outside of this collection, so I'm going to create a new collection, and this is going to be the high poly NES controller. Okay, now I'm going to grab that cube and just drop it into there. Okay, so now we can hide everything if we don't want to see the background stuff, and we can hide the NES controller if we don't want to see that. Cool, right. So with the NES controller, we're going to just move it into position, so G on the keyboard and then Y, and I'm going to move it down so that we can then scale it. So I'm looking at the distance between here and here and here and here, so that I know I'm going to scale it up a little bit. I'm just going to quickly turn on my screencast key so you can see which buttons I'm pressing as I'm pressing them. Cool, right. So we're going to scale this now, so S on the keyboard, and then I'm going to press Y for the green axes, and then I'm just going to scale it up so it fits the NES in that direction, and then S again for scale, and then X on the keyboard, and we want to scale it in this direction so it fits the NES like that. Then we're going to come to a sort of a perspective view so we can see how deep the asset is. And then here again we want to go S for scale and Z this time for scaling it in the Z axis. And I am just eyeballing it at the moment. Then I'm going to press G and Z. I'm going to bring it up so that it's above my reference image, so I can see it through it when we're looking at it in this sort of angle later on when we're in see-through mode like that. See-through, sorry, is Alt and Z. Okay, so I'm happy with the shape so far. So it looks about right. And then the next thing we're going to do is just going to press Tab, which means we're going to edit mode. So you can see the difference when you're in object mode. You'll only have these options here. If you're in edit mode, then you'll see these options here, and it's Tab that allows you to jump in and out of those two different modes. Okay, first thing we want to do is we want to select each of these corners, and we want to chamfer them or bevel them. So in order to select all of them at the same time, I'm going to go into see-through mode so we can see the one in the back, and then I'm just going to click and drag this little marquee, and that's going to select my edges if I have edges turned on, which I don't currently. So 2 on the keyboard is edges. You can see it's changing them up here. So vertex, edge, and face, they're 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard. So we want to press 2 on the keyboard for our edges, and then we can select our marquee across, and that selects those edges. Then we can do Control and B, and then pull away, and we're creating a chamfer now on that corner. Now I'm going to just show you that we're doing something wrong here, and it's a good thing to explain how things can go wrong if you don't set your scale for your objects properly. So remember, this was a cube initially, but we scaled it out quite a lot in their sort of X axes. Which means that our bevel now is affecting more in the X-axis than it is in the Y. So we need to change that. I'm going to undo that bevel that we just did there. I'm going to come back out of edit mode and into object mode by pressing Tab. And then I'm going to make sure that I've got my controller base selected, and I'm going to go Control and A, and this is going to reset the scale. So if we look at the object over here and look at it in terms of its item, there's its scale factor at the moment. So we can see that we extruded it quite a lot on the X-axis, and then we scaled it quite a lot on the X-axis, and we scaled it a little bit on the Z, and then we minus, it was 1, and we scaled it down on the Z. So that all needs to be set back to 0 in order for our chamfer tool to work properly, or bevel tool to work properly. So as I said, it's Control A, and then scale. And these are now all set to 0, 0, 0, okay, and N to hide that dialog box there. Then we can go back in, so press tab again, and we should still have our vertical edges selected. If we don't, then just reselect them. Then we can go Control B again, and then we can add a little bit of chamfering to that. And I'm going to add just an extra 1 in there, like so. So now we should have something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, I'm going to come out of see-through mode so you can see a bit clearer. There we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that we don't have sort of polygons in our asset that are more than 4 sides. So I'm going to go 1 on the keyboard, and I'm going to select this vert here and this one over here by holding down Shift to select more than 1, and then I can press J to join, so it joins those 2 verts together, boom. And then the same this way, so this one to that one, press J, and then the same on the other side, and we're just working our way around, so make sure you press J, not Control. Working our way around, just adding these edges in. Now what those edges are doing is it's making sure that our middle face is 4 sides, that these are 4 sides, and that these are 4 sides. Okay, these pieces along here. So do exactly the same on the underside. So here's where having our collections separate works well for us. So we can just turn off the collection of the lights and the flooring, or our reference photo, which means we can see underneath. So 1, 2, select, select. Now I'm just hitting J each time. Okay. So that's the first piece done. Then we want to work out where this middle section is. So we need to bring back our collection so we can see our reference image. And then with our cube selected, we're just going to go Alt and Z so we can see it see-through mode. And I want to work out where this piece is here because we're going to cut that piece out, or cut an area so that we can do an extrusion on it. So Control R, and that's going to create a new line running through. I can scale, I can press or scroll on my scroll wheel and add more or less slices straight through it. We want 2, and then I can just click, and then I can move those as well. So if we can move them ever so slightly. So I want to look at it from the top view again. So top view is 7, numpad 7 on the keyboard. And then if I'm in edge mode, so 2 on the keyboard, it means I can select one of these edges. So I hold down Alt whilst I'm selecting, it will select the whole loop of that edge. So it loops all the way around. Come back into numpad 7, and then I can do GG on the keyboard, so pressing G twice will allow me to move that edge along its horizontal axis. So I want to move it to roughly around here, and then same on the side, so Alt click, GG, and then move this one into position as well. And then we want to do exactly the same thing in the horizontal axis. So I'm going to select and mark it across. So I'm selecting all of these horizontal lines. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go Control and R to put 1 in. Again, I'm going to scroll wheel up to make sure I create 2. And I'm going to move the first one into position. It's the bottom one. And then I'm going to Alt click the top one, GG, and bring that one down into position. Cool. And then we've got an area here where we can cut out at the bottom. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to come back out of see-through mode. So Alt and Z, and I'm going to press E on the keyboard, oops, and I'm going to press 3 on the keyboard, sorry, to select that middle piece in there. And then I'm going to scale that in, so I'm going to press E now to scale, and I can scale it up or down, you see. So I'm going to bring it down slightly, like that. That might be a little too much, we'll leave it there for now. We can actually, I just want to move it up slightly, it looks a little bit too much. Okay, so that's that done. I just want to make sure that I didn't accidentally create extra vertices here. Yeah, I did. Okay, so let's just go back. I thought I might have done when I did that extrusion. Okay. Right, let's come back again. So 7 on the keyboard, let's come into see-through mode. Let's make sure we've got that line in the right place. Cool, okay. Come back out of see-through mode. 3 on the keyboard, select the face that we want to extrude. E, then for extrusion, and we pull it down. Okay, this is where we want to be. Now I want to create sort of slight curves on this section here. So if we look at the actual asset, it's got like curved corners on it. So we're going to do that here for this. So that's a simple case of selecting the piece that you want to have those edges in. So this one, this one, this one, and this one. Holding down Shift when I want to select more than one edge at a time. So I've selected all of those 4 corners, and then again Control B, pull away, and we're creating a nice curve there. That's what we want to see. Cool. Then 1 on the keyboard, I'm going to rejoin up these edges here because at the moment this shape is more than 4 sides, which is something we don't want. So select 1, hold down Shift, select the one that you want to join to, press J, and work your way around. J, J, and finally Cool. So now we've got that curve that we want in here. The only thing that's missing now is that this shape here now has more than 4 sides, so these two need to come together, so they need to come to a triangle here. So the way we do that is we select one, hold down shift, select the other, press M on the keyboard for merge, and then we want to merge them at the center, so C to merge them at the center. So now that we know that it's M and C, we can go click one, hold down shift, click the other, press M and press C, and it will do those for us. 1, 2, M, C, 1, 2, M, C. Cool. So now we have everything's 4-sided, other than this piece here, which is 4-sided, but we'll have the line. Every quad is 2 triangles essentially, so we can see where our 2 triangles will be here. Okay, we could, if we wanted to, grab these guys and just level them out with here, because if we look at it from an angle, we can see that it kind of raises up and comes back down again ever so slightly here and there. So we could change that, but it's not going to cause major problems with the asset, and our high poly is going to be fine for what we're doing today. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to make this higher poly, so we're going to add some smoothing to it, and to do that we're going to come into our modifiers over here, and then we're going to add this subdivision surface. Now if I add it now, it's going to look a bit of a mess in this middle section, because we haven't got any retaining edges, so I'll just show you what it looks like. I'm going to press tab so that we can see it without the wireframe on. You can see it's made a bit of a mess of this. So we're going to fix that up. It's also made these bits a little bit too smooth as well, and if you look at the controller, they're nowhere near as smooth as that. So let's come back out of tab, and I'm going to leave my my subdividing on, but I'm just going to press this little button here, which allows you to see it in the viewport or not, which means that now I can go back in and still make changes to the asset. So I'm going to go Control R, and we want to put a line in here, but close to the top. And what that does, if we bring back our smoothing, you can see that, I'm going to press tab again, you see that it's smoothed that area out, it's kind of tightened that line up for us, which is what we want in comparison. You can see it in comparison to the bottom one, so that one's kind of rounded, whereas here it's a lot more sharp. Okay, so that's what we need to do around the rest of the asset. So I'm going to come off that mode again, I'm going to go Control R, and I'm going to put one down at the bottom here, and then around this guy here as well we need some, so I'm going to do Control R again, I'm going to place one just there, Control R again, I'm going to place one just there. And then this bottom piece as well needs to have, so you can see it's more than 4 sides, right? So there's loads of sides here, so we need to do exactly the same thing as we did at the top. So I'm going to zoom in on this guy a little bit, make sure I can see all the verts that I need to access on this side. So I want this one here and that one there, so shift in order to select more than one, and then join them together, spin around, do the same on the other side. Make sure I'm selecting the right one. Cool. And then straight across the other way as well. And finally, cool. Okay. So now if we look at what our subdivision is doing, so I press tab, just so I can see it without the wireframe on, and then here we can edit our viewport, so we can smooth up that a little bit like that. So you can see we've got a tiny bit of clipping, and all that is our, if I come back out of tab, these here perhaps need to just move ever so slightly away, and the same on this side. Let's move those back, and then these ones here, that one, move those back a little, and here. Okay, there we go. So now if we come out of tab, that's smoothed that up much nicer than before. The other thing that we need to add to this, so we can still see a little bit of faceting, so you can see here, you can see these sort of like gradiated, like grey colours kind of fading into lighter colours and darkers. Those we can get rid of by just right clicking and making sure we've got shade smooth turned on. And then with shade smooth, whenever you use shade smooth, you want to also make sure that your normals are set to auto smooth, and this here, you can set that anywhere between kind of 45 and 60 is good. It's just that angle, so if anything is over a certain amount angle, so if something's 90 degrees, you probably want a sharp edge on it. If something is 45 degrees, you probably still want a smooth edge on it, right? So between 45 and 60. So with this asset, I'm going to change this one to 60, and then we can carry on. So there's the kind of the beginnings of the controller, ready to go. Again, we're not worrying about the amount of polygons that are in here at all. It's not a problem for us at this stage. The next thing, if we're coming to see-through mode, is we need to create these little cutouts here, and there's a little hole where the wire goes into as well. There's one of these at the top, and there's one of these at the bottom, in exactly the same place. So we're going to go 7 on the keyboard to look at it from the top, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and right-click in the middle of where this this place is. So this piece here. That moves my origin point. So it means that whenever I create a new asset or a new standard primitive, it's going to drop it wherever I put that that little origin point. So that's Shift and right click in order to move that thing around. Then we go Shift A, and we want to bring in a mesh, we want to bring in a cube, and then S for scale. We want to scale it down so it's roughly the right size for the little cutout that we've got in there. Then we can come to another angle, and let's come out of see-through mode, and we can see how much that's going to cut into it for us. So they don't cut in that far. They actually probably more like that. And then we want the same, so that one of these is exactly the same place at the bottom. So in order to duplicate this cube, we just go Shift and D, and then we can move that then along the Z-axis and place it down here, somewhere like that. So I'm kind of eyeballing it at the moment. You guys can spend a bit more time if you want to make it perfect. If you've got a NES controller in front of you. I don't have a NES controller in front of me, so everything I'm doing is based off this reference, which is just one image, so it's a little bit difficult. Okay, the piece in the middle is it's kind of like funnels in, so it's not like a perfect, it's not just like a cylindrical hole, it kind of funnels in, so we need to make that. So I'm going to come to a side view, so I'm going to go with one on the numpad keyboard, you see it here, and I'm going to Shift and right click to move our origin point somewhere in the middle here, and then I'm going to use Shift A, mesh, and cylinder, and then we want that cylinder to rotate towards us, so we want to rotate it on the x-axis, so this one here. So we're going to go R and then X, and that means that we're rotating it this way, and if we hold down Control whilst we're moving, we can see in the top right hand corner that we're snapping to 90 degrees. I don't know if you could see that, it was up there at the time. Cool, so that's now where we want it in terms of the angle, but it's obviously way too big, so I'm going to press S on the keyboard for scale and just scale it down, and then G on the keyboard and Y to bring it back. Okay, so I'm just going to move it away from the asset for a moment, and then there's a couple of things I want to do to it first. So one is we're going to tab so that we can edit it. I want to add a few extra horizontal lines running through it, so I'm going to go Control and R, and then I'm going to use my scroll wheel to add in a few extra ones, such as that. Click to accept, and then click again to accept them where they're going to be. So you can move them left and right if you wanted to. Then I'm going to use this option up here, which is proportional editing, so it's almost like a soft selection. So if I turn that on, I can then choose to select these edges here. So if I look at it from a sort of an angle where I can select everything, I'm going to go Alt and Z, so I'm looking see-through. There we go. So I want to select these guys, and then if I press S for scale, but also I can change the size of this proportional editing, right? So if I scale now, can you see how that's affecting the rest of the asset? It's kind of like a nice soft selection, it works really well. So we want something like that, it kind of funnels in like that. So click to accept. We're going to turn that off now because we don't want to play around with that with other objects. I'm going to come out of my see-through mode, I'm going to come out of my edit mode as well, and then I'm going to right click and make sure that's shaded smooth, and then again we want to make sure that our normals are on anything over 30 on this one, so you can see here we've got a hard edge and here we've got a hard edge, but everything else is nice and smooth. And then we can move that in, so G on the keyboard, Y, and push it in as far as you think it needs to go. So I'm going to say something like that. It's probably a bit too far actually. Let's scale it in the y-axis as well, so it's a little bit shorter and fatter, and then I'm going to G and Y to move it back so that it sticks in. There we go, something like that. feels perhaps a little big. I'm going to make it a bit smaller. There we go. Cool. So that's the kind of cutouts that I want to leave inside the controller here. These cutouts, I'm going to combine them together. So I'm going to hold down Shift to select more than one. And I'm going to right click and choose Join. Just going to have a quick sip of water. Now you notice when I joined them together, they've taken on the properties of the first object. So our auto smooth's turned off. So we just need to reapply that. Right. Now, so we should start naming a few things. So these are our cutouts, or booleans that we're going to cut out of the object. And then we've got our cube, which is actually the high poly base. Great. Before I make any drastic changes now, I want to make a copy of this so that we've got a low poly kind of ready to go, so we can just remove all of the modifiers and have a low poly version. So I'm going to create a new collection. So right click anywhere in here, new collection, and then that collection 3, double click it and rename it to low poly NES. And then I want to make a duplicate of the actual base. So I'm going to go Shift and D, and I'm going to right click because I don't want to move it anywhere, and then I'm going to grab that and put it into my low poly, and then cutouts need to go into our high poly. Let's move those around. Cool. So I want to hide the the low poly. It's not needed right now, so we're going to use it later. Just turn that collection off. I'm not interested in it. Let's go back to our high poly base. So at this stage, I want to collapse the subdividing job that we've done on here. So the smoothing I'm happy with. So I'm going to come to its modifiers, and then here I'm just going to accept. So I'm going to click apply. So now if we look at the asset in its edit mode, you can see how much higher poly it is. And then we're going to add these pieces in now. So we're going to add a modifier. This is going to be a Boolean modifier, and then we're going to add, so here the little picker, we're going to add the object that we want to make cutouts of, and then here the difference is correct, so we want to cut those out. Let's just check that that's worked correctly. There we go. So the nice thing that Blender does is it allows you to have booleans that you can move around. So I can grab this. If I decided that actually it's in the wrong place, I can now move it anywhere along the asset. So I can put it like here, for example. And then if I hide those cutouts, you can see it's cut them out there. Okay, so wherever you put it is where it's going to make the cutout. And then you just hide the cutout, right? So that's that. And if you're happy with the booleans, then you can hit apply, and it will apply those boolean details into the asset as well. So if we go like that, this object now is hard and fast. That's exactly it. It's a high poly mesh with these details cut into them. Now I'm not too bothered about having these edges line up to each other. I'm not too bothered about this being a face that has too many edges on it. It's not really a problem when you're working with high poly meshes. The low poly we would, if we cut these details into the low poly, which we're not going to. You can if you want to. You've probably got enough polys to do it, but for this tutorial we're not going to. You would want to make sure that you have four-sided shapes. You don't want anything that's not four-sided. 4 or 3. You don't want anything higher. Right. So that's the high poly base created. And whilst we're at it, we may as well just have a quick look at the low poly, right? So let's hide the high poly, and we're going to untick the little box to make sure that we can see the low poly. So with the low poly one, we select the base, and we simply just get rid of the subdivision surface. So we take that off, and you can see we've gone back to a lot more sort of a blockier look. We can then go into tab and then start removing extra edges that we perhaps don't want. So 2 on the keyboard, Alt, click, and then delete to delete an edge, and you want to dissolve the edges. Okay, so we're getting rid of them by just dissolving them. So we're leaving the structure still there, we're just dissolving the edge away. So Alt, click, delete, and then I on the keyboard to dissolve the edges. Then to make this even more efficient, we could go to number 1 on the keyboard, click your verts that you want to move. So these ones, we're going to smash them over to here, so that, because they're not needed, right? We don't need them to be there, they're not doing anything. I'm just going to hide the collection that shows the floor so we can see underneath. So I want all of these edges, basically, all these verts, sorry. So I'm holding shift and selecting all of them. All of these, including these two. Okay, so that's all of those, all selected. Now I'm going to turn on this little option here, which allows when a vertex is moved close enough to another, it will automatically weld. And I'm also going to turn my snaps on and make sure my snaps are set to vertex. Cool. Now we can go GG on the keyboard, and we can bring these all the way over to the left hand side, and they will snap there. Done. Same on the other side. So select everything that you want. Oops, make sure you're holding down shift and not control to select more than one. I get confused, legacy, from using 3D Studio Max. Okay, and then again, GG, and smash them all the way to the right. You can just keep going, just pull your mouse all the way to the right. And then we're going to do the same thing in this direction. So we want these guys here, rotate underneath, make sure we select the rest of them. And then the same on this side, so those, oh, hold on, I didn't have shift selected. Make sure you hold down shift at all times, otherwise you're going to deselect what you selected before. Cool, that works fine. And then these ones we're going to go GG, and we're going to smash them all the way over to this side. Okay, and then the same on this last one. So these, hold down shift, these, one underneath, hold down shift, GG, all the way to the right. So there we've got a much lower poly asset. In fact, you can see the number of tries that we've got down here, so 164. There's still more we can get rid of, so there's still edges in here that we don't need. So 2 on the keyboard, this edge for example, delete I, this edge for example, delete I. That's about as low as we're going to go. So there's our low poly, ready to rock and roll. We should probably rename that. Cool, low poly base. Alright, next tutorial we will go through and create the high poly buttons, and then the low poly buttons, and then following that we will look at how we can unwrap the low poly, ready for us to take it into Substance. Okay.